Cuba, it's me, and welcome to episode 368 of The Willow Show, which stands for Wrestling is Life. Life is Wrestling, and I'm pretty happy today. One of my all-time favorite opponents, one of the best wrestlers I've ever shared a ring with, Mike Stevens. How you been, man?
Awesome, man. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm keeping busy, as busy as you can be for how times have been. But how about you? How have you been doing?
I've been pretty good. I mean, I've been missing wrestling, so I've been trying to do this to fill the void, but it's not the same, but it's something to, I don't know, just keep
Yeah,
me going, a little project there.
yeah, it's awesome, man.
Yeah, and we both started really young in wrestling. You were like, what, 16, 17?
Yeah. I was 16 years old when I started with Eric Young.
At
I remember,
WrestlePlex?
yeah, at WrestlePlex, and
Oh,
I still remember my first day. There was Sean Spears was there. Hippie was there. If you remember Hippie.
yeah, I lived with Spears, and then he moved in with Showtime there. But me and him
Yeah,
lived together before that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It
And
goes
what,
way back.
like, did you always like wrestling or?
Yeah, I grew up loving wrestling. I was that wrestling kid in school growing up. I was always into it. And then I ended up meeting a distant relative of mine. His name was Matt Young, who was a ref.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he recommended me to Eric Young's school. And he was like, this is probably the best place around for you where you're going to learn. And, me being 16 and just wanting to do it, it was about a 3 hour drive to Cambridge to get down there. And I only had my G1 at the time. So I had to convince my old man to give me a drive there once a week, once every other week for about I think about 6 to 8 months until I got my G2. And the first day I got my G2, I was there at class.
Where were you based out of driving 3 hours?
I lived in Orono at the time, so
Or no?
yeah, up by Peterborough.
Oh, okay. Wow.
That's why they called me Peterborough Mike for a while because that was the closest place to where I lived.
And like when I met you, you were in really good shape for not even like being a full grown ass adult. Like, did you always have size or into sports or?
I started working out at the gym when I was 14.
Oh,
I
okay.
still remember the Triple H VHS. It was like him in China. It's our time, and
Yes.
it showed him like working out in the gym, and I was like, I want to do that, kind of. And I remember going to a Good Life for my first time, and I've just it was a lot of learning experiences to get to where I got. I was never in great shape or anything, but I always went in and worked as hard as I could in the gym, and yeah, I got some results, I guess.
Well, you always had size, and you always had like the nice back then. You had the nice long hair, and you had good tights. And so, like, how was the
Yeah.
training? Did you pick up on it quick, or?
Oh, it took me a while to catch on. Like it at first being so skinny, like I was probably about 130 pounds when I started, and it hurt. Like anyone that wants to get into wrestling, that's probably the first thing you're gonna realize it hurts a lot, especially if you got a smaller frame too. So that was probably one of my main motivational reasons to try and get a bit bigger too, was like the bigger I got, the less it hurt in the ring too.
Yeah,
So it was like,
absolutely.
yeah, so I was always just trying to work out as much as I could so that you can look like a wrestler, in my opinion, was the main goal,
And
and
even
and
though,
work like one.
oh yeah, and even though Showtime was such a great trainer, a lot of those guys helping, like TJ Harley and Spears
Yeah.
and Hippie and everyone, there was what a group that you guys had there.
Oh yeah, they're amazing people. TJ Harley especially too. He went out of his way and helped me a lot. I owe him a lot. He brought me down to Niagara Falls after Showtime school closed down to the NSP school, the Neil
Oh
Sperry
right,
Pro
yeah,
School.
yeah.
And that was like a dream come true for me being a kid, because that was the indie show that I used to always get to go to. That was like my once a month show, and I remember seeing like the Showtime Danger Boy ladder match, and that was like the biggest deal back in the day when you're a fan. Like that to me was bigger than Ring of Honor or any of those companies at the time. And
It was
it was like,
over huge.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
everyone knew
like,
about it.
yeah. So when I got to work that show finally, that was like a dream come true. That was like my dream, was to work for that company. And then, JT Player, Jess, and then they're all really cool guys.
Yeah, man, they
And
had something hot going on at that time. Yeah, and everybody
yeah,
wanted to be booked on it. And
yeah,
but like I think TJ got you a couple of your first bookings. Like I first met you
yeah,
in Buffalo in like 2003, 2004.
yep,
And
yep. I crossed with,
TJ was on that thing. Did you go down with him as well?
yep, him and Spears. The
Oh, right. Spirit. They were both in the main event. It was like a 5 versus 5
that
match.
was a good show too. That was a good main event they did. I still remember that one. There was a few
Yeah.
of the TNA guys against them, and it was. I just remember they just like went out and had fun, and I was like, that was like a good experience watching guys work, like seeing that. Because I remember my match, I was so nervous, and I remember we had something happen where we had to go out there and just kind of wing it, and we
Yeah.
ended up having a blast too with it. So it was like a lot of nerves for me for that first show.
Well, we got there really late. My car ride, it
Yeah,
was like me and Eddie and like I think like Jesse Jones and Fox, and we
yeah,
were late getting there. And then there was just that tiny little curtain to change in, so I don't think we got to plan anything. But
yeah,
I always loved wrestling you because we were both so young, so we were willing to let each other try anything, kind of thing. Like where some of
yeah,
the older guys would be like, "Oh, you listen to me out there, kid," right?
yeah. We clicked really well. We had a hell. We've had some really good singles matches after that. Like I think every year or at least once or twice a year, we had a good match, like a match against each other, and it was always really, really well done, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
That's
but
for sure.
you took off, I feel, right away. Like, I was kind of just wrestling for PWA. All of a sudden, you were getting
Yeah.
booked everywhere. I felt like,
Oh, thanks, man. I didn't think of it like that back then. I was more just into always trying to improve. I would always get really down on myself kind of back in the day, but I was young and, trying to find my way in my own confidence kind of, I guess. But I never looked at it like that until you put it like that. So I really appreciate that.
yeah, I think looking back now, that's kind of like you look at your accolades. But when you
Yeah.
weren't booked, you were going to the shows and trying to get on and stuff. Like you had that hustle, you wanted it. I felt that's the
Oh
impression
yeah.
I took away from it anyway.
Yeah. No, I really did I wanted to make a living at it. And that was like my main goal. And obviously over time things change, right? But that was like my whole early 20s was going as hard as I could with wrestling, and my whole life revolved around it. It was a really fun time, though. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
No, man. What was some of your favorite like matches back then or memories? Because I remember you were like going up to like Oshawa or Ottawa and like doing some shows in the States, like we already mentioned. And
uh, just like some of my favorite my
yeah,
matches
just
that
what sticks out to you from like the first 2, 3, 4 years of your
I
career?
I really love the matches that we had because we really clicked well, and it like we both anyone that like you could throw ideas back and forth off, and you click like that. For me, I was always more nervous working with the older guys because I didn't,
Me too.
being younger and all that. So I would never speak up as much as I probably should have with what my abilities were. So I really wish I had have like pushed myself a little harder with some of the more veteran guys and, prove myself a little better with them. But some of my favorite matches, I would say, would probably be when we went down to like IWA Mid South and we were starting to
Oh
try and
yeah.
get in with those ones. I worked a few guys. I remember working the Ian Rotten retirement show, and that was a really good crowd for that one. I remember doing the opening match for that one, and I was like, I was probably at my biggest for that match. I remember doing the big Davy Boy power slam and like it was a fun time and like got a good reaction from it. And probably say one of my favorite times was working Brody Lee in the ECW arena, and
Wow.
it was only like a 2 minute, 3 minute squash match because I think he was going to WWE at the time. I'm not too sure the situation of that, but it was around that time when he was getting a really big push and he was making a big impact. And I just happened to show up at the show. I wasn't even booked on it either.
Yeah,
So
like I said, you always did.
yeah, and I had my purple trunks, and I remember I was a face, and the promoter was like, "You're not going to get over too well with this crowd wearing those as a face," and he kind of laughed and John being a really cool guy, he was like, "What do you want to do?" Yeah, and even though it's like a 3 minute squash match, I was like, "Just run it." When the ref's checking my knee pads and all that, run and give me the biggest boot you could, and I'll take like the Triple H over the top, kind of from the turnbuckle, kind of. And right away, we
Yeah.
got a big reaction right from the start. And then I just remember firing up on him, and so I didn't get booed out of the building. That was like the most fun. And then we got a big holy shit chant when he gave me a big power bomb at the end, and I was like 240 at the time, so for him giving like a 240 pounder power bomb, that made him look really, really strong too. So it was a fun time. We always clicked really well. We never got to work a lot, but he was a good, really kind-hearted guy, and I miss him.
Sounds like he's giving because not a lot of the veteran guys would ask you what you wanted to do.
Yeah, that's what was cool about him. And I still remember his. I believe it was his first match, but I think it might have been one of his first matches, but it was against Sean Spears, and for NWA Upstate in Rochester, New York. So right from the start, we all kind of remembered each other. So yeah, we all go way back.
Yeah, and I always felt like you were such a good, like, even when you got to be way bigger compared to when you started, you always sold like you were a lightweight. You always like, you took these bumps and like would just throw yourself and just, I don't know. I would just always appreciate that from you. And you always had fancy tights. Did you always design your own gear and stuff, or?
Yeah, I always drew them, and then I would draw them, and then I would get them made at the Seductions in Oshawa. She was really good. And then eventually, like I knew how to sew when I was younger, so I started making my own near the end.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like when I had the long tights and all that, I made them all myself. So because I draw, paint, and I do a lot of different kind of every kind of art pretty much. So
yeah,
that was like something I was wanting to learn.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, you got out of wrestling for a bit because you went full in on the music, right? Like the Devoked.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big transitioning point in my life. I had a lot of injuries from wrestling. We were going to the States almost every weekend. And, I got into a bad car accident probably about 6 months before that. It really, really got me down. We were hit by a drunk driver, me and my brother, and kind of changed a lot of things for me mentally. And then physically, I started to get more hurt. I was full of injuries, and being at, 230, 240, the weight was just making me get more injured because I'm not really a big guy to begin with.
It's tougher on your knees because that's not your natural weight, right?
Yeah. And then, I made some mistakes and all that. And I just stopped doing it. I was like, I'm going to take a break from this for a while. And I didn't know what. I knew I was going to come back at one point, but I didn't know when. I didn't know it was going to be 10 years later. But and
it can be discouraging too, because like 6 months, you have all your momentum going, and then you feel like you lose all that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was like, well, I'll tell you another funny story about that after the music situation. But after, it was like all I had beside me at one point, I was really depressed, and all I had around me was a guitar. So, and my brother played drums, so I picked up the guitar. And if it wasn't for what guys like Showtime and them taught me in training, I wouldn't have had the patience to learn that thing, first of all, because I could play a few things, but I picked it up and I was like, I studied that thing. Like I learned my theory, my scales, my chords, everything. And just the whole art. It was like putting together a wrestling match for me, to like making a song, right? Like, and the ability to be able to memorize that, like, is pretty complex. So I enjoyed the challenge of just the art of music, and I fell in love with that. And then I went back and did one show. Michael Elgin was the one guy that called me back to do a show, and it was almost a year later. Yeah, and I came back and I was probably 160 pounds. So it was kind of like, they're like, "What happened to you, man?" And I was like, "I was just practicing this guitar. Like, I don't really have any set plans or anything, but I'm just enjoying life right now, kind of, trying to find myself." And
yeah,
I didn't really have any plans to come back in wrestling at the time, but I still missed it. But then after that, I ended up getting into a band because I kept playing. And
were you self-taught though, pretty much guitar?
Yeah. Oh,
wow.
Yeah. And then when I joined the band, well, it was my brother's band. He was the drummer, and the other guitar player, his name was Pat. And he doesn't play in a band anymore, but this kid was probably one of the best guitar players I've ever met in my life. He could play anything. He taught me to play by ear. Like we learned how to harmonize. Like we'd play Iron Maiden songs, Megadeth, everything you could think of. That was like the most complex things we could think of, just to try and play hard stuff. So we got pretty good at that, and it was a fun time. But yeah, it was definitely a fun experience. I got into a lot of trouble. I learned a lot about myself from that. When it came to stage presence that I lacked in wrestling, because I was very nervous in wrestling. So when I got to play music, and you have a couple beers before you go up on stage, and you learn to headbang your hair around, and you're like, man, I wish I had this charisma when I wrestled. I wish I wasn't as nervous. So that was the one thing that kind of motivated me to want to come back to wrestling. At one point, I'm like, I can actually perform now in front of people, like, with confidence now. So that was the one thing, that kind of made me always keep wrestling in the back of my mind. And then, I just ended up meeting up with or contacting Chris Chambers a few years back, and I was like, I want to do it again. And
it's Super Kicked, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Which is an awesome school, by the way.
Yeah, I feel like they're producing so many good students. Like in the last 2-3 years, they might have produced the most talent. That guys that are actually going to do something with it.
Yep. Yeah, he's very, very specific. Has his attention to detail is next to none when it comes to training people. Like he'll pick you apart and make you a better wrestler. So I really appreciate the help that he did for me. I went down there, I stayed down in Toronto for a few months, and I was in the ring almost every day to get back into it, which the first day back in the ring was like the first day of wrestling again. It was like I woke up the next day, I couldn't move, your neck's all sore and back, and which is probably what it's going to be like for a lot of us when the quarantine's over.
Yeah.
We get back to it. So
the first show back.
Oh yeah, bit of a warning. Take a few bumps before you do your first matches back. But
well, like you were saying before, like you're always like whatever you were passionate about at the time. Like first it was wrestling, then it was music. You kind of like obsess over it, go all in. Like that's all you can think about and stuff like that. And I feel like now I follow you on social media. You're crazy that with your diet and working out and stuff. Like it's really it motivates me. I'm like, man, this guy is like so precise on everything you do and like has it down to a science.
Oh, thank you. And a lot of that is the challenge that I need for myself too. So it's something that like anyone can do pretty much. Like anybody can do it. That's like the thing is like it's the self-discipline of what it's been teaching me is what I've really loved about it. And it's teaching me to kind of go back and do the things that I couldn't do when I was younger, like following through with a goal, like not just going all out with a goal, but like, setting yourself a specific date and going all out with it. Like I've got a competition coming up in September and I haven't missed one meal, one
bodybuilding competition.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were actually competing in it. I thought you were just a personal thing that you were doing.
No. It started off as a personal thing. And then one thing led to the next. And, I met a few of the coaches at my local gym and all that. And they kind of pushed me in the right direction with it. And I was like, you know what, I'll give it a try. I think I can do good with this.
Oh, and, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm going to see how it goes. But,
so is it like back in the day for wrestling, you were just trying to put size on? Is it about size now, or is it about definition? Like what is the goal for these competitions?
Me, proportioning, because you could be 190 pounds and look like you're 240 if you know how to, proportion yourself right. So for me, like symmetry was a big thing. Like you can get as big and chunky as you want, but if you don't have a small waist, you're going to look probably smaller than what you actually are. If you're smaller, with big shoulders and a small waist, you're going to look huge. So symmetry was a big thing too. It's an illusion kind of with bodybuilding.
Yeah. Like
that's like the fun.
Use your strengths and work with your strengths. Like if you have the height and, skinny legs or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on it, but I'll cut it short because I said 10 minutes. It's been 15 minutes.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have you on again. Would you be willing to do it again?
Yeah, for sure, man. Anytime.
Oh, okay. And are you, when wrestling picks back up in Ontario, you going to be doing that as well?
I would like to.
Yeah,
I would like to. I'm following through with this show first. I've committed to that. I'm going to do that and then go from there. But what ironically happened was I was wrestling. I was going down to Hamilton to train just kind of lightly last fall, and I tore my bicep. I had a slight tear in that. So that's what led me into bodybuilding, believe it or not, was I couldn't go into the hammerlock position or anything, but I could still curl. So I had to take a bit of time off from that. And that's what led me into this situation. So it's more of like a rehab than anything for myself and try to build myself stronger. So I would like to come back to wrestling. That would be one of my top priorities, but after the show, I'd say.
And do you still play music?
Oh yeah, I still play. I got my guitar in my room with me. I'm always picking it up. I'd like to start a band again, but just for fun and see where it goes. I like jamming with my brother and that.
Yeah, and it's easier now. Like you don't even have to do shows or concerts. You can just put up your stuff on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. And
yeah, that's the hardest thing for me. I like live shows. I love performing live. So the whole online thing for me, like even back when we played shows, I was never like into filming like guitar tutorials for YouTube or anything. I just like to rip it live. So,
or even like recording. Did you guys ever record demo or any that kind of stuff? Or
we did, but it never got released.
Man.
Yeah. So maybe one day it's somewhere on an external hard drive, but no, we ended up stopping. We stopped playing before we ended up getting that released. But we got a lot of material. So hopefully one day, you never know if people care enough, we might put it out.
So the show, the bodybuilding competition's in September there?
Yeah.
Where is that? Is that Ontario or?
Yeah, it's in Toronto, I believe. It's September 11th. It's the King Kong bodybuilding show is the name of it.
Nice.
It's about all the info I got right now. I think it's about 9.5 weeks away.
Do you have to do anything to qualify for that?
It's a regional show. So to be able to qualify for like a professional show, I would have to do this one. So depending on how I place in this one, that would determine where I like if I could do a professional qualifier. So
yeah, and someone might just see some talent in you and say, hey, come and join my gym or whatever, right?
That's what I'm hoping for, because I train in a little tiny dungeon gym right now. It's a private gym right now because of the quarantine. So we're literally training in the dark with no lights on. No one can see what we're doing. And that's been probably the best experience for training I've had in a long time too. Just the old dungeon gyms.
Oh man. Well, I really think highly of you. Whenever I've been around you, I always liked wrestling you, and I'm glad we got to touch base, and I really appreciate you coming on the show, letting me interview you, dude.
Oh man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And so make sure you like, or you get a leg drop, comment, or you get a clothesline, subscribe, or you get a suplex, and share, or you get a sleeper. That's all. Episode 368 of the Willow Show with Mike Stevens. You're a great guest. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.